Elena Hart, already face-to-face with the HOA president on a fog-choked Washington Mountain road. Gravel cracked under the tires of Elena Hart's pickup as she braked hard at the foot of her own driveway. A white SUV blocked the entrance, hazard lights pulsing in the mist like a heartbeat. The air smelled of wet cedar and distant rain. The sound of a lone raven echoed through the valley. A woman in a fitted blazer stepped out, umbrella snapping open with military precision. Her lipstick was the color of dried blood. "Elena Hart?" she called, her tone already a verdict. Elena kept one hand on the steering wheel, pulse climbing. She'd been in confrontations before. Angry mayors, corrupt contractors, politicians who hated reporters. But this was supposed to be her clean slate, her quiet chapter. "Yes," she said, pushing open the door. "Who are you?" The woman smiled the way bankers smile before foreclosure. "Victoria Langford, president of the High Ridge Estates Homeowners Association." She said it as though she were announcing a royal title. Behind her, two men in puffer jackets stood beside the SUV. Clipboards pressed to their chests like shields. "This construction," Victoria gestured toward the partially built cabin higher up the hill, "is in direct violation of community covenants." Her heels sank slightly into the mud, but her confidence didn't. "You've ignored 3 notices." "I moved in 4 days ago," Elena replied. She hadn't even unpacked her coffee maker. Victoria opened a folder, pages snapping in the damp air. "Section 7A, subclause 12. No unapproved structures, no visible utility sheds, no—" Elena cut her off. "You can't enforce rules I never agreed to. I bought this property from the county auction. There wasn't any HOA paperwork in the deed." Victoria's smile sharpened. "Your predecessor signed in 2022. Membership transfers automatically with ownership." Elena's throat tightened. She remembered the old listing photo. Moss-covered roofline, boarded windows, the note sold as is. Nothing in that screamed planned community. "Look around," she said, sweeping a hand toward the fog-wrapped pines. "Does this look like suburbia to you?" One of the clipboard men coughed. Victoria didn't flinch. "The association's boundaries extend to the ridge. Everything visible from the valley floor is under our aesthetic jurisdiction." Elena barked a short laugh. "Your what?" "Aesthetic jurisdiction." The phrase hung in the air like perfume. Elena felt her reporter instincts stir, that tightening behind the ribs that said, "Record everything." She tapped her phone to start audio capture, sliding it into her jacket pocket. "What exactly do you want, Ms. Langford?" Victoria stepped closer. The umbrella tilted, funneling rainwater down its edge. "You have 24 hours to halt construction and remove all materials. After that, fines begin at $1,000 a day. We take community standards very seriously." Elena studied the woman's face. Perfectly made up, but the eyes were restless, darting, calculating. She'd seen that look during interviews with executives moments before indictments. "You don't look like someone who likes rules," Victoria added softly. "You look like someone who makes trouble." The remark slid under Elena's skin. For a second, the mountains blurred into the newsroom she'd left behind. Flash of headlines, her editor's face the day she walked out after exposing the wrong developer. She inhaled the scent of wet pine and diesel and forced herself back to the present. "Maybe I do," she said. "But I always find the reason behind them." Victoria's umbrella twitched. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise to read the fine print." The 2 men exchanged uneasy looks. Victoria snapped her folder shut. "Then expect consequences. We protect our community from outsiders who think they're above order." As the SUV reversed down the driveway, gravel spraying, Elena felt the first chill of something larger than bureaucracy. This wasn't about noise ordinances or paint colors. There'd been intent behind Victoria's visit, like a story rehearsed too many times. She climbed back into her truck, wiped condensation from the windshield, and whispered to herself, "Welcome home, Elena. Day 4. And you've already found your villain." The next morning, the rain hadn't stopped. Mist clung to every pine needle. Clouds rolled low enough to graze the treetops. Elena sat at the small folding table inside her half-finished cabin, laptop open, coffee going cold. The roof still lacked shingles, but the generator hummed steadily, her one small rebellion against silence. She replayed the recording from yesterday, Victoria's voice crackled through the speakers. You have 24 hours. Outsiders who think they're above order. Each syllable sounded like it belonged in an exposé. Old habits kicked in. Elena opened a fresh file titled High Ridge Dossier. She typed notes, HOA formed recently. Boundary maps? Financial filings, who profits? The keys clicked like a heartbeat. For the first time since she'd left Seattle, she felt awake. At 10 a.m., a truck engine echoed up the dirt road. She stepped outside, raincoat hood drawn, expecting her contractor, Pete. Instead, she found a man in a county vest holding a clipboard. Morning, ma'am. Building inspection. I didn't request one. He shifted uncomfortably. Orders came through the HOA liaison. Routine compliance. Elena's stomach sank. Already? He avoided her eyes. Look, I just check boxes. Permit number? There isn't one yet. I'm outside incorporated limits. This property's private. He scribbled something anyway. Then you'll probably get a citation. Sorry. When his truck disappeared into fog, Elena stood in the driveway, rain dripping off her hood, and realized the pattern. Victoria hadn't come alone. She'd brought the system with her. That night, thunder rolled down from the peaks like drums. Elena sat on the floor beside her sleeping bag, reading through public record databases on her laptop by lantern light. Her fingertips were raw from typing. The smell of damp wood filled the half-built cabin. Every search returned the same anomaly. High Ridge Estates HOA, incorporated 6 months ago. 6 months. Yet the property she'd bought had been abandoned for 3 years. She leaned back, eyes burning. 6 months ago, she whispered. After foreclosure. After county auction, someone had drawn the HOA map after the land changed hands, which meant whoever filed those papers knew this parcel would sell cheap and wanted control of it. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. You should have left when I told you, said Victoria's voice. Tomorrow morning, sheriff's coming with a stop work order. Might save you trouble if you pack tonight. The line clicked dead. Elena stared at the dark screen, pulse hammering. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the skeletal frame of her cabin. Ribs of wood against the storm. She whispered to the empty room. You picked the wrong journalist to threaten. She turned back to the laptop, fingers flying again, pulling county filings, business registries, any trace of the woman who'd just declared war. Rain hadn't stopped by dawn. The sky was the color of bruised metal when tires crunched again on her driveway. Through the fog, blue lights flickered, subtle, not siren bright, like someone wanted authority without attention. Elena wiped her palms on her jeans and stepped onto the porch. A county cruiser rolled to a halt. The door opened and a man in a tan uniform stepped out, rain beating on his hat brim. Ms. Hart? He called. That's me. Deputy Lowe, Chelan County. Got some paperwork here from the High Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Says you're in violation of community covenants. He offered the envelope as if it were a snake. She took it carefully. So you're serving an HOA complaint in the middle of a thunderstorm. He shrugged. When the boss calls, I drive. You can appeal it through county zoning. Elena broke the seal. The text bled from rainwater, but the words were legible enough. Immediate stop work order. Fines, penalties, and a line about potential seizure of unapproved materials. She looked up. Who signed this? Victoria Langford. She chairs the HOA board, not a county official. No, ma'am. But there's a memorandum of understanding with code enforcement. Keeps neighborhoods tidy. Elena's pulse thudded. You realize she has no jurisdiction out here? He hesitated, shifting his weight. Look, Ms. Hart, between you and me, these HOA folks have friends downtown. They call, people move. He lowered his voice. You didn't hear that from me. She nodded slowly. Thanks for the honesty, Deputy. He tipped his hat and retreated to his cruiser. The tires spun mud as he backed out, vanishing into fog. Elena stood alone again, envelope limp in her hand. The rain was cold enough to sting, but her anger burned hotter. Inside, she spread the papers across the table. The HOA letterhead looked official, gold crest serif font, but the signatures didn't match the ones she'd seen online during her midnight search. One name in particular jumped out. Douglas Krenke, legal advisor. She Googled him. The first hit was a disbarred attorney from Spokane, license suspended for fraudulent filings. Her stomach twisted. She leaned closer to the laptop screen, scrolling faster. Krenka had been reprimanded for creating fake property. Agreements and backdated contracts for developers. Exactly. The kind of trick Victoria would need to trap her land under HOA. Control, the cabin groaned. In the wind as she whispered, "You're sloppy." Victoria, she printed screenshots, slid them into a binder already labeled evidence, and kept digging. The Washington State Business Registry listed High Ridge Estates HOA LLC, not Association Inc., but LLC. That single difference meant it wasn't a community organization at all. It was a for-profit company. Her heartbeat quickened. "You're not protecting property values," she muttered. "You're selling them." By noon, the rain had thinned to drizzle. A rust-red pickup bounced up the road, her contractor, Pete, finally returning with supplies. He stepped out, hat dripping. "You look like hell, boss. Something happen?" She handed him the stop work order. "They're trying to shut us down." He scanned it, jaw tightening. Typical HOA garbage. "Want me to keep working?" Elena hesitated. Her reporter mind said yes, gather evidence. Her cautious side said, "Don't give them reason to escalate. Work inside the structure only," she decided. "No heavy machinery. Film everything you do." Pete gave a short salute. "Got it." That afternoon, Elena drove into town. The nearest coffee shop doubled as the local gossip hub. A chalkboard sign out front read, "Pumpkin Latte Season. No HOA approval required." Inside, warmth and espresso filled the air. Locals glanced up from their mugs as she entered. Stranger in town, Seattle accent. She ordered black coffee and opened her laptop. When she typed High Ridge Estates LLC owner of record, the registry spat out a single registered agent. Langford Holdings Group. P.O. Box 714 Olympia. Her pulse quickened. She followed the breadcrumb to a state tender. Database? Langford Holdings had recently submitted bids for Mountain Vista Resort Development Phase 2, a resort. She scrolled through blueprints showing luxury cabins, golf greens, helicopter pads, right across the same ridgeline as her property. So that was the plan. Absorb the ridge into the HOA, declare her cabin non-compliant, force her out, flip the land to the resort. Textbook land grab wrapped in community bylaws. She sat back, staring at the steaming mug, the hum of espresso machines fading into the roar of her heartbeat. "Working hard, Ms. Hart?" The voice snapped her back. Victoria Langford stood beside the counter, immaculate as ever, holding a paper cup and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Elena closed her laptop slowly. "Small town. I thought you'd be too busy writing fines." Victoria chuckled softly. "Oh, I make time for problem properties." "You mean independent women who own their own land?" "Defiant tenants," Victoria corrected. Elena's jaw tightened. "Tenants? Read the covenants carefully. You'll find that High Ridge Estates LLC retains surface use rights on all parcels. You're merely an occupant until compliance is verified." "That's not how deeds work," Elena said flatly. Victoria's eyes gleamed. "That's how our deeds work." She placed a business card on the table, thick, embossed, expensive. "Consider a buyout, Ms. Hart. $35,000 above your purchase price. You could walk away clean." Elena let the silence stretch. "That's your offer after threatening me with the sheriff? Think of it as opportunity before litigation." Victoria sipped her latte, left the cup half full, and glided out, perfume trailing like smoke. Elena picked up the card. Gold letters. Langford Holdings Group, investing in tomorrow's communities. She turned it over and, with a pen from her bag, wrote one word across the back in bold letters: extortion. That evening she called an old contact from her journalism days, Sarah Kim, an attorney now specializing in real estate fraud. The phone rang 4 times before a familiar, calm voice answered. "Elena, haven't heard that name in years." "I didn't die, just relocated," Elena said. "And I think I've found your next case." Within minutes she'd outlined everything. The surprise HOA, the stop work order, the LLC structure. Sarah whistled. "Classic shell operation. They form a pseudo-HOA, annex land, then sell it to developers. But forging covenants after a sale? That's felony territory." Elena exhaled. "Can we prove it?" "Send me copies of everything." And Elena, record every conversation. People like Langford bury their crimes under manners. "I already started," Elena said, glancing at the phone still recording on the table. Sarah laughed softly. "You never really retired, did you?" "Guess not." By nightfall, fog had thickened again. Pete had gone home, leaving the cabin skeleton quiet except for rain tapping the tarp roof. Elena reviewed drone footage from earlier. Just routine progress shots. But as the video played, something caught her eye. In the frame's corner, near the tree line, headlights glowed for a second, then vanished. She scrubbed back. A black SUV parked behind the ridge, engine running, lights off. Her gut twisted. Spying now, Victoria. She zoomed in, froze the frame. The license plate was half obscured by mud, but readable enough. She snapped a screenshot and filed it under evidence. Surveillance. Thunder rumbled again. Low and steady. For the first time since moving there, Elena locked the cabin door and loaded the old revolver her father had left her. Not out of fear, but for the comfort of control. She set it beside her notebook, wrote a single line on the first page. They came for my land. But they forgot whose story this is. Wind pushed through the trees all night, carrying the smell of rain-soaked cedar and diesel. By morning, the sky cleared just enough for sunlight to burn through the mist like a spotlight. Elena hadn't slept. Coffee had replaced blood. Her laptop pinged an incoming message from Sarah. Subject, preliminary findings. Attachments, 3 PDFs, 2 screenshots, 1 ominous note. You were right. Elena opened the first file. The HOA's incorporation documents. The signatures were scanned. But the metadata showed something damning. Each file created 2 months after the date printed on the form. Backdated, forged. The second document listed bank transfers from Langford Holdings Group to an account marked Douglas Cranka Consulting. Sarah had highlighted the totals in yellow. Over $180,000 moved within 6 weeks of the HOA's creation. The last file was a county zoning map, lines drawn neatly around the ridge. But there, outlined in red, was her 5-acre parcel labeled pending rezoning approval. The request date, 2 days before she even bought the land. Elena leaned back, heart pounding. They planned this before the auction. Her phone buzzed. Sarah's voice came through, quick and clipped. Those filings are garbage. They used template forms from another county and changed the names. Total amateur hour. What about the zoning request? Filed by a front company tied to Langford Holdings. I traced the P.O. box to the same UPS store where Victoria's HOA gets its mail. Elena rubbed her temples. So she forms a fake HOA, boxes me in, then sells it to the resort. That's the shape of it. Sarah hesitated. But you should be careful. These people know how to bury opposition, sometimes literally. Elena smiled without humor. They already tried fear. Next, they'll try dirt. By afternoon, the valley hummed with chainsaws. Pete's crew worked quietly inside the frame, ignoring the unmarked SUV parked half-hidden beyond the road. Elena pretended not to see it. Cameras were rolling. That was protection enough. Then the generator died. Pete cursed. Fuel lines clear. Somebody must have drained it. He knelt beside the machine, sniffed the tank. Smells like sugar. Elena's stomach dropped. They sabotaged it. He looked up. Who would? She cut him off with a look. Who else? Pete exhaled. I'll grab another generator from town. No, Elena said. Leave it. I want it exactly how it is when Sarah's investigator gets here. Pete hesitated, then nodded. You got it, boss. When he drove away, silence settled heavy. The forest felt too still. No birds, no wind, only the ticking of cooling metal. Elena crouched near the generator, photographing every angle, every grain of sugar glinting in the sunlight. Proof. Always proof. By sunset, Sarah called again. I've contacted a friend in the state attorney's office. They can't act yet, but they'll watch the case. Keep documenting everything. They're escalating, Elena said. They vandalized my equipment. Sarah's tone hardened. That's criminal mischief. File a report, I tried. Deputy Lowe won't even log it without probable suspect. Sarah sighed. Let me guess, he's friends with the Langfords. Probably family, Elena said. Small towns keep corruption in the bloodline. Then we go bigger, federal. Elena smiled faintly. There's the Sarah I remember. That night she couldn't sit still. The rain had stopped, but her nerves hadn't. She walked the perimeter with a flashlight, boots crunching gravel. Halfway down the access road, she spotted something glinting under the beam. Hundreds of roofing nails scattered like caltrops. Her throat tightened. She knelt, picked one up, rolled it between her fingers. The heads were bright, clean, freshly poured from a box. This wasn't kids. This was deliberate. She took photos, then gathered a handful into a plastic bag. When she turned back toward the cabin, headlights flared from behind. A black SUV idled 20 feet away, engine low, windows tinted. Elena froze, light fixed on it. Who's there? The SUV reversed slowly, then disappeared into the trees without a sound. Her heartbeat drummed in her ears long after it was gone. She whispered into the dark. You think you can scare me? You should have researched who I used to be. The next morning, she drove to the county courthouse with her binder of evidence. The building smelled of old paper and lemon cleaner. A clerk named Betty squinted through her glasses as Elena explained the mess. "Ma'am, these HOA boundaries were filed post-auction." "That's strange." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Looks like someone redrew the map to include your land." "Never seen that before. Can I get copies?" Elena asked. Betty nodded, printing a stack. "Careful who you upset out here. Folks don't like their business questioned." Elena smiled. "Neither did politicians, but that never stopped me." When she stepped back outside, sunlight glared off wet pavement. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number again." She answered on instinct. "You should stop digging, Ms. Hart." Male voice this time, low and calm. "You've already cost people money. Who is this?" "Someone who believes in community order." The line went dead. She stared at the phone screen until the reflection of her own face looked unfamiliar. Tired eyes, mud-spattered jacket, determination carved where fear should have been. That evening, Sarah texted, "Check your email. You'll want to sit down first." Elena opened the attachment, a PDF of county contracts between Mountain Vista Resorts and Langford Holdings Group. Under Property Acquisition Phase 1, her lot number appeared, labeled Priority Parcel Mar 1. Right beside it, an expected acquisition cost, $0. Her chest tightened. They'd already told investors the land was theirs. No wonder Victoria wanted her gone immediately. Any delay made the fraud visible. Elena grabbed her camera and walked outside. Fog crawled through the pines. The valley below glowed faintly from scattered house lights. She aimed the lens at the horizon and spoke quietly, recording herself. "They think I'm a scared homeowner. They don't remember I used to expose people like them for a living. If they want a story, I'll give them one. Front page, no edits." At 2 a.m., a crash jolted her awake. She grabbed the flashlight, heart hammering, and sprinted to the doorway. Her lumber pile lay scattered across the ground. Boards snapped, nails bent, muddy footprints everywhere. The smell of diesel stung her nose. A red plastic fuel can lay tipped on its side, contents soaking into the dirt. She lifted it, saw fingerprints in the grime. Her voice shook only slightly as she whispered to the recorder. "Sabotage confirmed. They came onto my land." Far down the valley, an engine roared and faded. She watched the taillights vanish and thought, "Every crime leaves a witness if you're smart enough to record it." Elena turned back to the cabin. Rain beginning again, her reflection ghosting in the window glass. "You started this, Victoria," she said softly, "but I'm going to finish it." The next morning began in fog so thick it felt like breathing glass. A car door slammed outside. Elena grabbed her jacket and stepped onto the porch just as a silver sedan appeared through the haze. Sarah Kim climbed out. Dark coat, messenger bag, city confidence wrapped in exhaustion. "Still allergic to normal vacations?" Elena said, half smiling. Sarah's grin flashed. "You call this a vacation? You're living in a crime scene." Elena laughed once, the sound dry as pine bark. "Then welcome to my exhibit." They hugged quickly, an old habit from newsroom days. When Sarah pulled back, her eyes swept the damaged lumber pile, the scattered nails, the dead generator. "Jesus, Elena, they really are trying to break you." "They'll have to try harder," Elena said. "Coffee?" Inside, Sarah spread her files across the makeshift table. "Everything you sent checks out. The fake attorney, the backdated forms, the rezoning request. It's a paper trail made by idiots." Elena leaned against the counter. "Idiots with money?" "Worse," Sarah said. "Idiots with friends in local government." She pulled a folded map from her bag. "These signatures on the zoning approval?" "County planner's office. The same guy who rubber-stamped 3 of Langford's resort projects in the last decade. So it's bigger than one HOA." Sarah nodded. "Much bigger." They fell silent for a moment, listening to rain drip through the half-finished roof. "Remember that story we chased in Tacoma?" Elena asked. "The one about the port contracts? Where they tried to sue you for libel until the FBI showed up?" Elena smirked. "Yeah, I missed that kind of clarity." By midday, they'd set up a whiteboard against the cabin wall. Lines, arrows, dates, names. The words fraud, extortion, and rezoning scam circled in red marker. Sarah tapped the board with the cap of her pen. "We'll need sworn statements from locals." "Anyone else harassed?" "My contractor, Pete, and the clerk at the courthouse suspect something." "Good, keep them talking. Record everything." Outside, the sound of an approaching engine broke the quiet. "Tires on gravel." Elena's shoulders tensed. If that's another so-called inspector. The knock came sharp, official. When she opened the door, Deputy Lowe stood there again, hat dripping, expression unreadable. "Afternoon, Ms. Hart. We got reports of illegal waste disposal on your property." Elena blinked. Waste disposal? There's nothing here but lumber. He held up a photo on his phone, grainy image of black barrels by the creek. She frowned. That's not my land. That's half a mile north, he sighed. Look, I know this is probably nonsense, but procedure says I gotta check. Sarah stepped beside her. Officer, are these complaints coming from Ms. Langford's office? He hesitated. Off the record? Everything in this valley comes from that office. He looked embarrassed. Just sign here to confirm inspection notice served. Elena signed. The pen trembled slightly, more from anger than fear. When he left, Sarah muttered, They're setting you up for environmental violations. It's a classic smear prelude. Then we get ahead of it, Elena said. She grabbed her camera. Time to make our own record. They hiked down toward the creek. Fog hung low. The air smelled of moss and wet iron. When they reached the clearing, Elena stopped short. There really were barrels. 3 of them, rusted, labels peeled off, sitting just inside her boundary fence. Holy hell, Sarah whispered. They planted them. Elena took photos from every angle, zoomed in on the fresh tire tracks nearby. They want an EPA panic. Keep shooting, Sarah said. We'll have the timestamps ready before they can file their report. A branch snapped behind them. Both women turned. Nothing but shifting mist. Elena's pulse spiked. We're being watched. Then give them a show, Sarah murmured. Smile for the cameras. Elena raised her voice deliberately. Thank you, Deputy. Appreciate you confirming this isn't hazardous waste. Somewhere in the fog, an engine revved and faded. Sarah exhaled. You're fearless, you know that? No, Elena said. Just done running. That evening, the first smear post hit Facebook. Sarah spotted it while scrolling on her phone. Community alert. Woman operating illegal dump site in High Ridge. The post used a photo of Elena crouching by the barrels. Cropped, grainy, stripped of context. Within an hour, dozens of comments. Arrest her, she's poisoning the creek, protect our kids. Elena felt the old familiar chill of public judgment. Sarah looked up. We can counter it, but once the lie spreads, let it, Elena said. Every lie leaves fingerprints. They just gave us defamation grounds. Still, her chest ached when she saw one comment from a local mom. I told my son to stay away from that woman's property. Elena closed her laptop. They're turning the whole valley against me. Sarah's tone softened. They turned the town against you. They haven't seen the truth yet. Elena stared at the rain streaking down the window. Then let's show them. They spent the next day crafting a press packet. Copies of deeds, screenshots of forged filings, photos of sabotage. Elena's narration would tell the story straight. Evidence first. Emotion second. The way she'd done back in her journalism prime. As dusk fell, she recorded the opening line. When power hides behind paperwork, truth becomes the only weapon that scares it. Sarah smiled. Still got it. But before they could upload anything, a loud crack split the night. A gunshot or maybe a car backfire. The window shattered above the sink. Glass rained down. Elena hit the floor. Sarah ducked behind the table. Silence followed, long and heavy. Elena's voice shook, low and even. That wasn't a warning. Sarah looked at her. You think they'll stop now? No, Elena said, standing slowly. I think they just made their biggest mistake. She picked up the recorder, pressed the red button again and whispered into it, steady and calm. Attempted intimidation at documented 9:47 p.m. They just confirmed everything we need. Outside, the forest swallowed the sound of retreating tires. The next morning began in fog so thick it felt like breathing glass. A car door slammed outside. Elena grabbed her jacket and stepped onto the porch just as a silver sedan appeared through the haze. Sarah Kim climbed out. Dark coat, messenger bag, city confidence wrapped in exhaustion. Still allergic to normal vacations? Elena said, half smiling. Sarah's grin flashed. You call this a vacation? You're living in a crime scene. Elena laughed once, the sound dry as pine bark. Then welcome to my exhibit. They hugged quickly, an old habit from newsroom days. When Sarah pulled back, her eyes swept the damaged lumber pile, the scattered nails, the dead generator. Jesus, Elena, they really are trying to break you. They'll have to try harder, Elena said. Coffee? Inside, Sarah spread her files across the makeshift table. Everything you sent checks out. The fake attorney, the backdated forms, the rezoning request. It's a paper trail made by idiots. Elena leaned against the counter. Idiots with money? Worse, Sarah said. Idiots with friends in local government. She pulled a folded map from her bag. These signatures on the zoning approval? County planner's office. The same guy who rubber-stamped 3 of Langford's resort projects in the last decade. So it's bigger than one HOA. Sarah nodded. Much bigger. They fell silent for a moment. listening to rain drip through the half-finished roof. Remember that story we chased in Tacoma? Elena asked. The one about the port contracts? Where they tried to sue you for libel until the FBI showed up. Elena smirked. Yeah, I miss that kind of clarity. By midday, they'd set up a whiteboard against the cabin wall. Lines, arrows, dates, names. The words fraud, extortion, and rezoning scam circled in red marker. Sarah tapped the board with the cap of her pen. We'll need sworn statements from locals. Anyone else harassed? My contractor, Pete, and the clerk at the courthouse suspect something. Good, keep them talking. Record everything. Outside, the sound of an approaching engine broke the quiet. Tires on gravel. Elena's shoulders tensed. If that's another so-called inspector. The knock came sharp, official. When she opened the door, Deputy Lowe stood there again, hat dripping, expression unreadable. Afternoon, Ms. Hart. We got reports of illegal waste disposal on your property. Elena blinked. Waste disposal? There's nothing here but lumber. He held up a photo on his phone. Grainy image of black barrels by the creek. She frowned. That's not my land. That's half a mile north, he sighed. Look, I know this is probably nonsense, but procedure says I gotta check. Sarah stepped beside her. Officer, are these complaints coming from Ms. Langford's office? He hesitated. Off the record? Everything in this valley comes from that office. He looked embarrassed. Just sign here to confirm inspection notice served. Elena signed. The pen trembled slightly, more from anger than fear. When he left, Sarah muttered, They're setting you up for environmental violations. It's a classic smear prelude. Then we get ahead of it, Elena said. She grabbed her camera. Time to make our own record. They hiked down toward the creek. Fog hung low. The air smelled of moss and wet iron. When they reached the clearing, Elena stopped short. There really were barrels. 3 of them, rusted, labels peeled off, sitting just inside her boundary fence. Holy hell, Sarah whispered. They planted them. Elena took photos from every angle, zoomed in on the fresh tire tracks nearby. They want an EPA panic. Keep shooting, Sarah said. We'll have the timestamps ready before they can file their report. A branch snapped behind them. Both women turned, nothing but shifting mist. Elena's pulse spiked. We're being watched. Then give them a show, Sarah murmured. Smile for the cameras. Elena raised her voice deliberately. Thank you, Deputy. Appreciate you confirming this isn't hazardous waste. Somewhere in the fog, an engine revved and faded. Sarah exhaled. You're fearless, you know that? No, Elena said. Just done running. That evening, the first smear post hit Facebook. Sarah spotted it while scrolling on her phone. Community alert. Woman operating illegal dump site in High Ridge. The post used a photo of Elena crouching by the barrels. Cropped, grainy, stripped of context. Within an hour, dozens of comments. Arrest her, she's poisoning the creek, protect our kids. Elena felt the old familiar chill of public judgment. Sarah looked up. We can counter it, but once the lie spreads, let it, Elena said. Every lie leaves fingerprints. They just gave us defamation grounds. Still, her chest ached when she saw one comment from a local mom. I told my son to stay away from that woman's property. Elena closed her laptop. They're turning the whole valley against me. Sarah's tone softened. They turned the town against you. They haven't seen the truth yet. Elena stared at the rain streaking down the window. Then let's show them. They spent the next day crafting a press packet. Copies of deeds, screenshots of forged filings, photos of sabotage. Elena's narration would tell the story straight. Evidence first. Emotion second, the way she'd done back in her journalism prime. As dusk fell, she recorded the opening line. When power hides behind paperwork, truth becomes the only weapon that scares it. Sarah smiled. Still got it. But before they could upload anything, a loud crack split the night. A gunshot or maybe a car backfire. The window shattered above the sink. Glass rained down. Elena hit the floor. Sarah ducked behind the table. Silence followed, long and heavy. Elena's voice shook, low and even. That wasn't a warning. Sarah looked at her. You think they'll stop now? No, Elena said, standing slowly. I think they just made their biggest mistake. She picked up the recorder, pressed the red button again and whispered into it, steady and calm. Attempted intimidation at documented 9:47 p.m. They just confirmed everything we need. Outside, the forest swallowed the sound of retreating tires. Morning came pale and heavy, like the mountain itself was exhausted. Elena stood in front of the broken window, glass crunching under her boots, wind whispering through the jagged frame. The world smelled of cold pine and gunpowder. Sarah was already on the phone. Police report filed. They promised to look into it, which means they'll do nothing, she said flatly. Elena rubbed her eyes. Good. Let them ignore it. That proves the pattern. She swept the shards into a metal bucket, each clink echoing like punctuation. Outside, engines rumbled farther down the valley. Word had spread. By noon, the posts multiplied. Armed woman confronts inspector. Unstable journalist causes disturbance. A local blog even ran a headline, Danger on the Ridge. Photos of the shattered window. Of the barrels by the creek. All cropped, twisted, stripped of truth. Pete stopped by for supplies, his face tight. Half the town's talking, Lena. Folks say you fired a gun last night. She laughed, dry and bitter. Yeah, right through my own window. He looked at her for a long moment. I told them that didn't sound like you. But be careful, okay? People believe what's loud. When he left, the quiet returned, a silence so dense it pressed against her ribs. Sarah leaned against the table. They're controlling the narrative. You need to take it back. Elena nodded slowly. Then we go public. Full exposure. She opened her laptop, started typing a statement. My name is Elena Hart. Yesterday someone fired into my home. The same people who formed a fraudulent HOA now want me gone, because I refuse to sell. Here's the evidence. One photo, one timestamp, one truth at a time. Sarah glanced at her screen. Once it's out there, you can't take it back. I don't want to, Elena said. I want them to see what they've created. Elena hit publish. For a second, nothing happened. Just the soft hum of her laptop fan and the rain easing on the roof. Then notifications began. 1, 2, 10, 50. Shares, comments, DMs. Sarah's eyes widened. It's catching fire. Elena scrolled through the reactions. At first, locals argued, some calling her paranoid, others demanding the sheriff investigate. But then, journalists from outside the county began quoting her post. One regional station reposted the photos, labeling it the High Ridge HOA scandal. Once it leaves their town bubble, they lose control, Sarah said quietly. An hour later, Elena's phone rang. Unknown number, she answered, ready for another threat. Instead, a woman's voice. Ms. Hart, this is Dana Ruiz from Cascade Public Radio. I'd like to interview you about your experience. Elena hesitated, then met Sarah's eyes. Sarah nodded once. Do it. By sunset, she was live on air. Her voice was calm, steady, the way it used to be when she anchored investigative pieces years ago. I'm not the first person they've tried to intimidate, she said into the mic, but I might be the first who kept records. The host asked, do you believe this HOA is operating illegally? It's not a homeowners association, Elena replied. It's a front for land theft disguised as community improvement. Somewhere in Olympia, Victoria Langford was listening. 2 hours later, Victoria appeared on her own Facebook Live. Perfect lighting. Perfect posture. The background. An elegant office framed certificate behind her. There's been a lot of misinformation spread by a disgruntled resident, she said, smiling thinly. We're deeply saddened by her unfounded accusations. Our community stands for safety and order. Sarah snorted, watching it. Classic PR defense. Smile while you lie. Elena leaned forward. Let her talk. Every word digs her hole deeper. But by the next morning, the valley was divided. Signs appeared at driveways, support High Ridge Hoe in neat blue print, while others read hands off Elena's land. The grocery store clerk avoided her eyes. Pete said his crew had been questioned by community reps, and a black SUV followed her again. Slow, deliberate, headlights off, Sarah said. They're desperate. Elena looked toward the fogged glass where her reflection stared back at her, tired but unbroken. No, she said. They're scared. The valley felt different now, quieter but meaner. People no longer waved when Elena passed. Curtains twitched instead. The grocery clerk rang up her coffee beans without a word. Every silence had weight. Sarah watched from the passenger seat as they drove back from town. They're isolating you, she said softly. Classic PR containment. Make you the villain before truth settles. Elena kept her eyes on the winding road. Let them. The quieter they get, the louder the evidence will sound. At the ridge turnoff, a white sedan waited, hazard lights blinking. A man stepped out wearing a county badge on a lanyard. Ms. Hart? He called, voice too polite. Environmental investigator, he said when she approached. We received complaints you threatened a board member yesterday. Elena blinked. Threatened? I haven't seen anyone from that board, he shrugged. Still, I have to document the allegation. Sarah appeared beside her, phone already recording. Then document this, she said evenly. We're filming every word for legal accuracy. The man hesitated. That won't be necessary. It already is, Sarah replied. He jotted a few notes, retreated to his car, and drove off fast. When the dust cleared, Elena exhaled slowly. "They're building a file against me." "Which means," Sarah said, "you're finally close enough to hurt them." By late afternoon, the fog began to lift, revealing a sky of pale steel. Elena stood outside the cabin, camera in hand, scanning the ridge road that wound through the forest like a scar. She felt watched again, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Sarah was inside uploading documents when she heard tires crunching gravel. "Elena," she called. "Someone's coming." A black SUV slowed to a stop near the gate. Victoria Langford stepped out, crisp blazer, sunglasses, perfect hair unmoved by the mountain wind. Behind her, a man in a cheap security uniform held a body cam and a clipboard. Elena crossed her arms. "You're trespassing." Victoria smiled, all teeth. "Actually, Ms. Hart, I'm here on behalf of the High Ridge Estates HOA to deliver an incident citation." Sarah joined her on the porch, phone recording. "You can leave it on the fence, Victoria." "Oh, this requires a signature." Victoria handed the clipboard forward. "Assault charge." Elena froze. "Excuse me?" Victoria's voice stayed calm, rehearsed. "Yesterday, during your so-called press statement, you struck a community volunteer who attempted to speak with you." Sarah stepped closer. "That's false. Not according to the footage." Victoria gestured to her guard. The man played a short clip on his phone, grainy, distant video showing Elena turning fast towards someone holding a camera. The next second, the camera fell, the image shaking. "It's edited," Sarah snapped. Victoria shrugged. "Our legal counsel will sort that out." Elena's pulse hammered. "You're framing me." "Call it accountability," Victoria said sweetly. "You wanted attention. Now you have it." After they drove off, Sarah leaned against the porch railing, jaw tight. "They're planting evidence now. That's felony territory." Elena's voice was low, steady. "Then we respond like professionals. How?" Elena looked toward the valley where the fog was thinning. "We make it public before they can. Upload the full footage, show the timestamps. We don't hide, we broadcast." Sarah nodded slowly. "You're turning their weapon around." "I learned that trick in journalism," Elena said. "Never fight in shadows when you can win in daylight." That night they released their counter video. Raw, uncut drone footage, security timestamps, full audio. At the 34-second mark, the volunteer in Victoria's clip could be seen lunging toward Elena, camera raised like a weapon. Elena simply lifted her arm to block it. No assault, no contact. Just another lie caught in 4K. The comments rolled in fast. "She's right, this is edited garbage." Classic smear campaign. Langford's losing her grip. For the first time in weeks, Elena felt the tide shift slightly in her favor. Sarah smiled. "They underestimated your reach," Elena exhaled. "No, they underestimated my patience." Fog thinned to a hard-edged light the morning after their counterstrike. For a few hours the valley hummed with a nervous energy, as if everyone were waiting to see which way the wind would finally blow. Elena packed a thermos and the camera rig into the back of the pickup. Sarah moved like someone who had rehearsed for this exact moment. Efficient, decisive, a litany of calls made and people set into motion. They'd won a small victory online. Now they had to turn that into legal and practical leverage. Sarah had already filed formal complaints, uploaded the uncut footage to multiple independent servers, and alerted a regional reporter she trusted. She also had a contact in the state attorney general's office, who would at least keep an eye on the filings. But paperwork was slow. Power and permits were fast, and those moved inside the span of phone calls and whispered favors. That afternoon, a fax arrived, archaic, official-looking, stamped with county insignia. Elena unfolded it as rain ticked against the cabin windows. Notice of suspension, pending review of permitting status. The paper said her development permit was temporarily suspended pending a review requested by the High Ridge HOA. It cited alleged procedural irregularities. The language was bureaucratic enough to sound legitimate, but the signature line was cold. Filed at the request of High Ridge Estates, LLC. Elena let the paper slide from trembling fingers and landed it on the table. She felt each beat of anger like a drum. "They're trying to freeze me out," she said, simple and sharp. "They are," Sarah answered. "Which means we have to escalate faster than they can manufacture paperwork." Her voice was a bridge between calm and fury. "I'll call the state. You document everything here, fuel, tools, anything they touch. If they try to remove materials, we file interference charges immediately." They split tasks like a practice team. Elena went outside to inventory. Generator intact, though Pete had taped the fuel cap. The lumber pile had been restacked and covered with a tarp that looked suspiciously new. as if someone wanted to give the impression of order before they could claim otherwise. She filmed everything with methodical patience, close-ups of serial numbers, timestamps, GPS coordinates. That night, when the valley fell into the thin, electric hush that comes before a storm, the lights went out. At first it was a blink. Then the runner at the horizon went dark and the cabin plunged into shadow. The generator Pete had set to manual was cold, its fuel cap drained and residue of sugar tampered into the line. The batteries inside the nearby solar rig were disabled. The entire northern side of the ridge fell into a blackout like a hand passing over a map. Elena stood in the dark, the beam of her headlamp cutting a hard, thin path. She could smell diesel and cigarette smoke far down the road. She called Deputy Lowe, but the line went to voicemail. She texted Sarah. They cut power. Evidence, tampered fuel lines, solar rig offline. I'm logging. Sarah's reply was immediate. Get safe. Record everything. Don't confront. Elena took a breath, then stepped outside. On the edge of the property, where the dirt road met the trees, fresh tire tracks were visible. 2 sets, heavy and wide. Near them, flattened grass and an unfamiliar brand of cigarette butt. Elena crouched and photographed each clue. Her hands didn't shake as much as they used to in a newsroom when deadlines shrieked. This was different. This was survival work. At 2 a.m., a low-toned vehicle idled beyond her gate. Headlights off, it moved like a creature breathing. For a moment, she thought about standing with a shotgun on the porch and daring them to act. Then she thought of Pete and the contractor, who depended on steady work, of Sarah's legal strategy, and of Emma's calm face when she'd promised to turn truth into remedy. She retreated to the shadow of the cabin and filmed the SUV from the tree line. Her hands were steady now, practiced. Whoever came to intimidate had no idea the day their intimidation would be recorded. By morning, the generator still wouldn't run. Men from the utility company, well-dressed, polite, arrived citing a system-wide fluctuation earlier that night. They promised restoration as soon as possible. Elena watched them closely as they worked, and when they left, she flagged them with a question about permits and permissions. One worker, a man with a slow blink, hesitated, then said offhand, "Big projects around here sometimes take precedence." He left as if that were a natural fact of mountain life, not a corruption sign. Sarah's calls were moving faster now. The AG's office placed a watch, and the regional reporter sent a journalist to do an on-air segment. But the Langford machine was already spinning a new web. That afternoon, a front group began circulating a petition demanding an independent environmental audit of Elena's property. They framed it as citizen concern, safety before everything, flyers with logos resembling official county seals, but with slight typographical oddities, appeared nailed to telephone poles. Someone had paid a small fee for a glossy ad inside the local mailer. A full-color spread asking, "Is the ridge safe?" with Elena's picture cropped next to a proven forgery image taken from that first viral post. The next blow came cold and fast. A county inspector sent a block letter order demanding the removal of all unpermitted structures within 48 hours, citing the temporary suspension of the permit. Elena read the notice out loud with grim humor. 48 hours. They really are trying to starve me out. They went to court the following morning. Sarah, Elena, and a now assembled small crowd of sympathetic neighbors, people who had refused to sign Victoria's petition, people who had seen the holes in the HOA's stories, sat across from Victoria and her polished attorney, a man who smelled faintly of cologne and certainty. Cameras and mics dotted the front row. The regional reporter had brought a camera crew. The judge, a man who looked as if he'd presided over many small-town dramas, asked for calm. Victoria stood, hands folded, and delivered a performance built of rehearsed outrage. She spoke about the sanctity of community standards, the need to protect children, the responsibility of leaders to maintain aesthetic cohesion. She invoked community values as if reciting scripture. Elena sat with the binder of evidence on her lap and let images and ledgers speak when her attorney, Sarah, rose. Sarah was precise and tight, the voice of the case. She laid out chain of title documents, pointed to the backdated covenants, and showed the bank transfer records tying Langford Holdings to shell accounts and to the HOA LLC. When Victoria's attorney objected, Sarah produced the drone footage showing the planted barrels and the tampered generator. The courtroom murmured. On the edge of the scandal, 2 things happened that changed the pace. First, a young county clerk named Betty, who had initially been too nervous to speak, brought Sarah a sheaf of unsigned, backdated documents she'd found in a filing cabinet. Memos showing Langford Holdings requesting assistance from a county planning liaison with fast-tracking verbiage. Betty had the fear in her eyes of someone who knew the world had tilted, and whose small act might tip it back. She slipped the papers across the table to Sarah with a whisper. "They told me to shred these." Sarah pressed Betty's hand until it stopped shaking. Second, a former employee of Langford Holdings, an accountant who had been quietly suspicious for months, emailed Sarah with bank statements and annotated records. She attached a voice note confessing under tearful anger how she'd been told which invoices to creative code. Her name was Mia, a woman who lived 3 towns over and knew how to disappear if she needed to. Instead, Mia stayed, and her documents stacked another plate of lead on Victoria's house of cards. Armed now with whistleblower evidence and an unwitting county clerk, Sarah moved like a hunter closing a perimeter. She filed an emergency petition to the state auditor for a freeze on all transfers involving Langford Holdings and related shell companies. She requested a criminal inquiry into the forged covenants and backdated signatures. The AG's office, which had been watching, finally leaned in. Victoria responded with the flailing elegance of someone who could not imagine losing. She pulled strings in the local chamber of commerce, and a small cadre of well-heeled homeowners, people who'd profited in silence, went public in her defense. They insisted on process and lambasted Elena for disruption. They hired a high-powered PR firm who rebranded Victoria as the community's protector. The valley became a chessboard. Elena's pieces were slower but surer. Documents, timestamps, witness statements, and crucially, moral clarity. Victoria's pieces were fast and sharp. Money, influence, local fear. Every move Victoria made to cut Elena's power or freeze her permits left a paper trail. Every attempt to frame Elena left an edit or a planted object that, when viewed in full resolution, betrayed the smear. The public, once primed to fear, began to see the seams. At night, after the lights came back on, a partial restoration after the injunction, Elena sat on the porch watching the valley breathe. Sarah was in the cabin, cross-referencing bank transfers with a pen-scribbled ledger. The moon washed silver over the pines. Elena felt tired. Not the ragged depletion of early flight, but the heavy wear that follows a hard, continuous fight. Yet there was steel under it now, a growing confidence that the right records, shown at the right time, could do what weapons never could, expose the lie in daylight. "Tomorrow," Sarah said without looking up, "we move on the audit results and press the whistleblower to testify if they'll go on record. We ride the media while the injunction is fresh. We make them spend money on lawyers instead of bribes." Elena nodded. "And we keep recording everything, every visit, every call. They can't intimidate what we've already turned into evidence." She thought of Emma, of the essay that would win her that scholarship, of the small hands that might one day hold a map of clean, protected forest. She thought of Uncle Silas. Had he ever weighed the decision to reveal his ledger? She imagined the old man, pipe smoke curling as he watched the valley finally sleep under fairer rules. The next morning, a caravan of federal auditors arrived. 3 cars, 2 men and a woman in plain suits with the kind of ID that shuts down petty local power plays. Victoria met them at the community center with her polished smile, but her eyes flicked in a way that betrayed worry. The auditors requested records, then asked to speak with the Langford Holdings accountant. The world, which had been orbiting around Victoria's small sphere of influence, began to pull toward a larger gravity. Elena watched the auditors' cars leave with a sense of slow vindication. She did not dance in the street or shout down the lane. She simply walked to the creek, cupped her palms in cold water, and drank. The water tasted of pine and river rocks and an honest kind of relief. But the fight wasn't over. There would be legal counters, PR retorts, threats thin as paper yet sharp as scissors. There would be trials of loyalty and sudden betrayals. Elena knew that the real test would be not one dramatic reveal, but the steady accumulation of truth, document by document, friend by friend, until Victoria's web was not just visible but untenable. She set her jaw and sent a single message to Sarah. "Keep pressure, no theatrics, record everything. Tonight, Jen from the Hill said she'll testify about the meetings where Langford spoke about timelines and deliverables. Get her on affidavit." Sarah replied with one word: "On it." Elena turned back to the cabin where a new pile of wood waited under a tarp. The generator stood idle but not broken. Her hands, calloused, scarred from years of honest work, felt steady. She began to plan. A week's worth of builds that wouldn't require heavy machinery. Framing, sealing. The patient work of building something real while the angry men in suits tried to build a fantasy with forged papers. Outside, the valley breathed under a thin, honest dawn. The war for the ridge would continue, but for the first time since she'd arrived, Elena felt like the person who wrote headlines could also write the rules by which a community would be judged. She would not break them. She would make them pay attention. The audit team's visit cracked open the valley like a pick through stone. Within 2 days, their questions spread through town. Who approved which invoices? Why the HOA held bank accounts? Outside the county, why board meetings had no recorded minutes? People who had smiled at Victoria now avoided her eye. Inside her office, she paced. Her manicured fingers drummed the glass desk, phone pressed to her ear. "No, we can't delay them," she hissed. "They already have the filings. Then fix it. Find someone to take the fall if you have to." She ended the call, stared out at the fog, and whispered, "You will not take this from me." Meanwhile, at the cabin, Elena and Sarah were sorting through another mountain of files. The reporters were coming back for follow-ups, and Sarah wanted everything airtight. "Langford will double down," Sarah said. "When people like her start losing the narrative, they try to rewrite it with panic." That night proved her right. At midnight, headlights flashed across the ridge again, this time 2 vehicles. Elena, half asleep on the couch, grabbed her camera and moved to the window. The cars stopped near the construction site. Doors slammed, shadows moved, men in work gear, carrying boxes. Sarah appeared beside her. "What now?" "Evidence planting," Elena whispered. Round 2. They slipped outside quietly, keeping distance, recording from behind the shed. The men stacked the boxes near the creek, the same place where the fake barrels had been. One man pulled out a paint sprayer and began misting the area. When they left, Sarah crept forward, flashlight low. The boxes were labeled hazmat, property of High Ridge Estates Environmental Task Force. Inside, empty paint cans, rags soaked in oil, plastic vials. All props. "They were going to call it an illegal dump again," Sarah murmured. "Not this time," Elena said. She filmed everything, then phoned the audit lead directly. By dawn, uniformed agents from the auditor's office and 2 sheriff's cars rolled in. Deputy Lowe climbed out looking uncomfortable. He wasn't leading anymore. The auditors took statements, photographed the site, collected fingerprints. Lowe muttered, "Guess this one's out of my hands." Elena met his eyes. "Should have been out of yours a long time ago." He didn't answer. Victoria arrived an hour later, still wearing that public relations calm. "What on earth is happening?" she asked the senior auditor. "Those materials were," the auditor cut her off. "Ms. Langford, we'll discuss this downtown. Please accompany us." The cameras were rolling, local news, freelance vloggers, curious neighbors. The scene unfolded in slow, perfect irony, Victoria's practiced grace cracking at the edges as she realized the performance was over. She tried to protest, but the agent's tone was final. "Ma'am, we have warrants for your company's financial records and communications." Her eyes flicked to Elena, a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You think you've won?" she hissed. Elena's reply was quiet, steady. "No one wins in this. The truth just stops losing." The following weeks blurred into depositions, statements, and the slow machinery of real justice. Sarah handled the formalities. Elena handled herself. Each day she rebuilt a small piece of the cabin, refusing to let the investigation freeze her life. The town thawed, too. People who'd once turned away began waving again. Pete came back. With a new crew, volunteers brought food, and even Deputy Lowe stopped by to apologize, his hat in hand. "Didn't know how deep it went," he said. Elena nodded. "Just make sure it doesn't happen again." When the indictments finally came down, the news broke statewide. HOA president charged in fraud, extortion, and tampering case. The article listed Victoria Langford, Douglas Krenke, and 2 county planners. Under it, a photo of the ridge, sunlight breaking through fog. Sarah found Elena sitting on the porch reading the piece on her phone. "Justice moves slow," Sarah said, "but it moves." Elena smiled faintly. "It's enough." She looked across the valley, where autumn was beginning to bronze the trees. The land was quiet again. No engines, no spotlights, no fear. "Maybe now," she said softly, "this place can just be home." The trial didn't look like the movies. No dramatic gavel, no shouting. Just long days of paperwork, quiet testimonies, and the slow, procedural unraveling of a lie. Elena sat through most of it, calm in the back row, listening to lawyers read aloud the story she had lived. Sarah testified first, voice measured and certain. each piece of evidence placed like a nail sealing a board. Then came the whistleblower, Mia, her hands trembling only at the start. She confirmed everything: forged signatures, fake bank accounts, the orders to plant evidence and manufacture community concerns. When the clerk named Betty took the stand and admitted she had been told to shred documents, the courtroom fell silent. Victoria sat at the defense table, posture perfect, eyes cold. But when the judge read the verdict, guilty on fraud, forgery, and attempted coercion, her shoulders slumped the smallest degree. The sentence was ordinary: fines, probation, business dissolution. Yet it carried the weight of something final. Langford Holdings was over. The HOA dissolved. The Ridge, free. Outside the courthouse, cameras crowded Elena again. One reporter shouted, "Ms. Hart, do you feel vindicated?" Elena paused before answering. "I feel tired," she said, and meant it. Then she added, "But yes, truth matters, even when it takes its time." Weeks later, the cabin stood whole for the first time. New windows, sealed roof, solar panels restored. The Ridge smelled of cedar and new paint instead of diesel and fear. Pete and his crew finished the last wall while Sarah packed boxes of case files to send to the AG's office for archiving. They sat on the porch that evening, watching light slide down the mountains. Sarah handed Elena a letter. "From the county. They're reinstating your permit. Officially this time." Elena smiled, tracing the embossed seal with her thumb. "Guess I'm legal again." "You were always legit," Sarah said. "They just had to catch up." Elena laughed quietly. "You sticking around?" "For a few days. Then back to Seattle. Someone's got to keep the system honest." When Sarah left, the silence that returned was gentler, the kind that belonged to wind through trees, not fear in the blood. Elena walked the boundary lines one last time, camera in hand out of habit, though there was nothing left to prove. At the creek, water moved clear over stones. No barrels, no lies. She crouched, cupped her hands, and whispered, "You're safe now." At the cabin, she poured coffee, opened her laptop, and began to write. Not a report. Those days were gone, but a story. A record for whoever would come after. Maybe her niece one day. Sometimes the loudest people talk about community, but real community is built by the quiet ones who refuse to give up. She titled it, "The Ridge That Fought Back." Months passed. Spring arrived early that year. Grass grew over the tire ruts, and the locals started holding small markets near the old community center. Hand-carved signs, baked pies, small laughter. They'd talk about that HOA mess like a legend now, a warning told in lowered voices to newcomers. Elena's cabin became part of the scenery, a reminder that one voice, one steady record could outlast a whole corporation of noise. Sometimes she'd still see strangers on the trail, hikers or journalists hoping for a quote. She'd smile, wave, but say nothing. The story was public now. It didn't need her voice every time someone retold it. One evening, as dusk settled soft and gold, a delivery truck stopped by. The driver handed her a small parcel, a printed book bound in gray and white. High Ridge, a true account by Elena Hart. She hadn't known the publisher had moved that fast. But seeing it there, weight and paper, her words anchored, made her exhale something she'd been holding for months. She placed the book on the porch table, next to her father's old revolver, now clean and rust-free. Then she looked out over the valley one last time, whispering, "Stories end. Truth doesn't."